She called her daughter.
I got to a payphone and I said, look, I shot this gun at Dad's house. I didn't know if anybody was, hit or hurt or anything. I said, oh my God, I'm in trouble now.
It was 5:30 a.m. The night was still clinging as the morning started to push through. All was silent. Not even the birds were awake quite yet. Her footsteps were silent on the carpet as she made her way to the master bedroom. In the early morning darkness, she could make out the two sleeping forms. Her anger washed over her as she watched the couple sleeping without a care in the world. But her world had fallen apart, and it was all their fault. They would pay. I think you know where I'm going with this. Elizabeth Ann Biscell Gia, I can't even say that, guys, don't roast me, was born to be a wife and a mother. She was raised in an Irish-Italian family where man went to work and women took care of their household. Her upbringing was very strict and very traditional Catholic. Betty was born on November the 7th, 1947, and raised in Eastchester, New York. Eastchester is a suburb about an hour from New York City. From an early age, her parents repeated the same mantra: go to Catholic schools, be careful with dating until you find a Catholic man, support him while he works, be blessed in your later years with beautiful grandchildren. Betty was a very smart and bubbly young girl. She loved telling stories with a perfect flair of drama. She was also beautiful and had her fair share of admirers as a teenager. Betty graduated from Eastchester High School in 1967. She went on to get an early childhood education degree from the College of Mount St. Vincent, a small Catholic women's school in New York City. At just 17 and a freshman in college, Betty met the man of her dreams, Daniel Thomas Broderick, who was also an Irish Catholic and a pre-med student at the University of Notre Dame. He was the perfect prince in Betty's fairy tale. The couple dated for 3 years before getting married on April the 12th, 1967. Upon return from their honeymoon, Betty learned that she was pregnant with their first child. Their daughter, Kim, was born in 1970 and was quickly followed by daughter Lee, her son, who they also named Daniel, and then another son, Rhett.
Dan, how have you too, Kim, handled the fact that your mother killed your father? Because now you both are left with no parents.
I don't know how you handle it.
Mm-hmm.
You just have, you really don't have a choice. She just seems to think that we're better off. She still thinks we're better off.
Mm-hmm.
And that's definitely untrue.
Does it bother you, bother the two of you? Because I spent a lot of time with your mom, and I talked to her for quite a while, and the thing that really surprised me the most was she doesn't seem to have any remorse about this. Not only doesn't seem, she told us she doesn't have any remorse about this. And that's still surprising to me. And I don't know if is that upsetting to you that she doesn't seem to be remorseful?
Very upsetting.
Mm-hmm.
I understand if she doesn't feel bad about killing Dad, but if she could at least feel remorse about leaving us parentless, or at least feel bad about the situation that we're all in now, but she doesn't.
Because what situation are you all? You all are all living with different people, right?
Right. We're all living with different people. It was just, we just got gypped out of a nice life that we could have had.
Mm-hmm.
And she doesn't even feel bad for being the cause of that.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Dan?
I think that she sort of does feel bad for it, but she doesn't want to admit it. Because she knows that we're all going through hard times and everything. And it's hard without her being there and without my dad being there. But if she admits to that, I think she'll feel like my dad won because, won the overall war between them, because she feels bad for doing it.
Dan graduated with his medical degree from Cornell University and immediately enrolled at Harvard Law School. His plan was to be a medical malpractice attorney, so he wanted as much education as possible in both fields in order to be the best. While Betty was having the children, she was also working to pay the bills. With Dan in school full time it was up to Betty to make ends meet. She fully supported her husband and family for the next several years. She was the main provider, with jobs selling Tupperware and Avon. When Dan graduated his law degree, he was offered a job at a prestigious law firm in San Diego. The family moved across the country to a new town and a whole new life. Their living status changed overnight. With a plentiful amount of money coming in from Dan's new job, Betty was able to quit her various jobs and focus on staying home and raising the kids. Dan worked long hours while Betty shuttled the kids from school to soccer games to dance lessons. They were the all-typical American family. Betty was in heaven. She had amazing children and a successful, handsome husband. They attended parties and wore designer clothing. They even owned a beautiful house. Highly un-Catholic, guys, I know. In 1978, Dan started his own law firm and had immediate success. Betty was proud to be the wife of the top medical malpractice attorney in San Diego. She glowed with pride at their shared success. After all, if not for her support, Dan wouldn't be where he was. But Betty's fairy tale was about to fall apart dramatically. By 1983, the Brodericks were millionaires, living in the well-to-do Carjola suburb of San Diego. They drove expensive cars and went on fancy vacations. They appeared absolutely perfect until Linda called Kenna happened. Linda was 21 years old and Dan's new legal assistant. She was young and beautiful and caught Dan's eye. She even looked like Betty. That is from 20 years earlier anyway. Linda had recently been fired as a flight attendant from Delta Airlines, and in the fall of 1982 she was hired by Dan's law firm. By October 1983, Betty started to suspect that Dan was having an affair. She was right. For years, Dan denied the affair with Linda, but Betty knew the truth. The late nights, the private phone calls, the beautiful assistant. But Betty wasn't going to give up. Her marriage may be falling apart, but she would still fight for it. She worked too hard to make her dreams happen. Dan was just going through a midlife crisis, and he needed her help to reset. Betty lost weight and got plastic surgery. She changed her wardrobe. She even changed her hairstyle. She changed everything that Dan told her was the problem. She wasn't going to let a little fling derail the life that she built. On November the 22nd, 1983, Dan's 39th birthday, Betty went to his office with a dozen roses and a bottle of champagne. She was going to surprise her husband and show him how much she still loved him. But Dan was gone, and so was Linda. According to the receptionist, the pair had left for a birthday lunch and never returned. Betty froze. Her life for the past 14 years flashed before her eyes. Betty did everything she was supposed to do as a wife and mother, and the minute Dan became wealthy and successful, he traded her in for a new model. Betty snapped. Betty returned home and yanked all of Dan's clothing from the hangers. She tossed them on the grill and lit a match. She watched his expensive, pretentious designer suits go up in flames. If he wanted to move on from her and their family, she was going to make it as difficult as possible. The whole time Dan was denying the affair, he was actually laying the groundwork for leaving Betty. Dan was now in love with Linda, and he wanted a divorce. In February of 1985, Dan packed his things and moved out of the house. He left Betty and his children behind. By spring of that year, Betty began to act erratic. She had hoped that with Dan being on his own, he would quickly realise how much she did for him and how much he needed her in his life. But she was proven wrong, as Dan seemed to be just fine. Outraged, Betty began to make a series of mistakes that would eventually lead to her downfall. One day, Betty drove her eldest daughter Kim to Dan's new home and dropped her off. Unannounced, Dan was not home at the time, and Kim had no way of getting in the house. Betty drove off with her daughter, stranded on the front stoop. Over the next few weeks, Betty would repeat this kind of behaviour with the other children, one by one. As the divorce proceedings began in September of 1985, Dan used these actions as proof of child abandonment and won sole custody of the children. If Betty thought things were bad, losing her children due to her own stupid behaviour was worse. The divorce continued to get ugly as Dan did his best to refuse negotiations with regards to alimony and custody. Broderick versus Broderick became one of the most infamous divorce cases in US history. It highlighted the role many wives at the time played in the success of their husbands' careers. The marriage may have fallen apart, but wasn't Betty due some sort of compensation for the years of supporting her husband, working 2 jobs and looking after the children while he pursued his career? I don't know about you guys, but I think she is due some sort of compensation. During these proceedings, Betty was broke, away from her children and on a downward spiral. No attorney would help her, and she was fighting a legal battle with a man who was a master of that arena. Betty was at her breaking point. She lost all sense of reality and began to act even more irrational. She was calling Dan's house at all hours of the day and night. She would leave obscene and threatening voice messages. The more Betty lashed out, the more Dan responded with calm, legal countermeasures like restraining orders. It was a nasty fight, but Betty was the only one getting down and dirty. In January of 1986, Dan hit Betty with his worst. Dan purchased a new home for Linda and his kids. At the same time, Dan sold Betty's house, the house that she had built with Dan and their children, and he gave her none of the proceeds from the sale. Betty stormed over to Dan's house and demanded her half of the sale, but Dan threatened to call the police if she didn't leave his property. Betty suddenly got quiet and walked to her car, but instead of leaving, she rammed the car into the front of Dan's house. Betty was immediately arrested and involuntarily committed to a psychiatric hospital, where she stayed for just 3 days. I don't know about you guys, but I think she should have stayed for a bit longer than 3 days. Maybe more like 3 months. The fight dragged on for 3 more years, until the divorce was finalised on January the 30th, 1989. The terms were in Dan's favour. Betty denied the $300,000 a year alimony she requested and lost custody of her kids. It was over. Dan was going to marry Linda, and Linda was going to raise Betty's children. On April the 22nd, 1989, Dan and Linda were married. At the same time, Betty walked into a sporting goods store and bought a gun. It had been 6 hard years of battle, and Dan had won. But Betty was still fighting to win the war. On November the 5th, 1989, 7 months after Dan and Linda's wedding, Betty drove to their home. It was 5:30 a.m. and still somewhat dark outside. She used her daughter's house key and walked into the house with her gun. She stepped foot into the master bedroom and silently watched as Dan and Linda slept peacefully in their bed. Betty raised the gun and pulled the trigger. Linda was shot twice, in the head and chest. She was killed instantly. Dan was shot once, in the chest. Blood everywhere. Dan was still alive and choking on his own blood. As Betty disconnected the phone and walked out of the house, Dan lived for another 30 minutes before succumbing to his wound. That night, Betty turned herself into the police. In October 1990, a year later, trial for the murders of Dan and Linda Broderick began. Betty's defence claimed that she was a battered wife and was physically, emotionally and psychologically abused by Dan. They argued for manslaughter. The state argued that when Betty brought the gun to Dan and Linda's house, it became premeditated, and that amounted to first-degree murder. Betty claimed she brought the gun because she planned to kill herself in front of Dan and Linda to show them what they had driven her to do. But Linda woke up, and startled by Betty, she began to shoot them instead. In November of 1990, the trial ended with a hung jury. A year later, in October of 1991, the second trial began. With lessons learned, the prosecution successfully portrayed Betty as the aggressor and planned murderer. In December of 1991, the jury came back with a different verdict. Betty was guilty of 2 counts of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to the maximum 32 years in prison. In 2010, Betty was eligible for parole. She continued to deny any wrongdoing and wouldn't acknowledge her responsibility for the life she took. She was denied parole in November of 2011 and January 2017. She will now not be eligible for parole until 2032. Dan and Linda are buried together at Greenwood Memorial Park in San Diego. This is a truly crazy case. I just can't believe that Betty went to the extent that she did, where she had to resort to killing both Dan and Linda to make herself feel better. At some point, I can't really blame Betty for what she did, but at the same time, I feel there was better ways to go about it, but she just wasn't mentally strong enough anymore to keep seeing these people in her life. The fact that Dan did have an affair on Betty after Betty was working 2 jobs and raising the children is horrible, but the fact that Betty brutally shot both Dan and Linda is even more horrible. In the end, no one won this war. Dan is dead, and Betty spends the rest of her life in prison, while their kids have no mother or father left. Thanks for watching if you made it this far anyway, guys. I really appreciate it, as these videos take a while to make. Please like, comment, share and subscribe.
Betty Broderick remembers the day, November 5th of last year, the day she said she finally had it.
And I was just standing in that kitchen saying, you know, Jesus Christ, I'm turning 42 years old, and I've been put through this bullshit since I was 35. 7 years of my life wasted.
For the past 2 days, Betty Broderick has been telling the court about her bitter 5-year divorce war with prominent attorney Daniel Broderick, how she says he left her destitute, without custody of their children, and how he left her for a younger woman. It was now more than she could bear.
I was just a mess. Everything just came down on me, and I just couldn't stand it another minute. And that's what I wrote on the stuff. I just can't stand this. I'm telling people I'm a child molester and I'm crazy and I'm an unfit mother.
Unable to sleep, Betty went to the home of her ex-husband and his new wife Linda and entered their house with a handgun in her purse. And although she admits shooting Dan and his bride of 7 months to death, she doesn't remember pulling the trigger.
I went into the room to talk to them or to wake them up or something, and they moved and I moved and it was over. I remember the real loud noise 5 times, but I didn't clearly remember it then. I mean, I just remember the noise.
Later that day, she turned herself in. Betty Broderick is on trial for 2 counts of first-degree murder, but she contends shooting Daniel and Linda was in self-defense after years of torment. The trial continues tomorrow with Betty Broderick still on the stand. Marianne Cucci, News 8.
This trial has been standing room only, and today it was even more so, as they came to hear the woman who has admitted she shot her husband give her side of the story.
Dan told a lot of his friends the night that he met me. I didn't find this out till later, that he was going to marry me the night that he met me.
In fact, the Betty Broderick story, as told by Betty Broderick, started off really quite ordinary.
He was the decision maker. And I was happy to finally be married. I wanted to be married very much all my life, and I was looking forward to cooking and fixing up the house and cleaning and having children.
Broderick told how she worked several jobs at a time, even while she was pregnant, putting Dan through medical and law school. She was composed until the subject of her children.
Was there a second child born?
Yes.
And was
Go ahead.
Broderick told how when her husband started making what she called major money as a medical malpractice attorney, he started looking unhappy, and how he finally told her.
A lot of this was my fault because I was old and fat and ugly and boring and stupid. And that, you know, he just wasn't having any fun in life anymore. If you're old, fat, ugly, boring, and stupid, you try to be younger. And
You go and try to get wrinkles taken off your face that weren't even there. You try and get your teeth fixed because I have one tooth that's a little tiny millimeter of something crooked, and I tried to be perfect. Absolutely flawlessly perfect for Dan Broderick.
By now, Dan Broderick had hired as his assistant Linda Kolkina. And soon, Betty said, it was clear the two were more than just working together. Betty remembers her 37th birthday spent without Dan.
And when the kids went to bed, I slit my wrists and swallowed every pill I could find in the house.
And later the same month, when Betty went to surprise Dan for his birthday and she found evidence in his office that he and Linda had been partying.
So I threw all his clothes in the backyard and I put gasoline on them and I lit them. And I waited for him to come home for the home-cooked roast beef dinner he wanted for his birthday.
When Dan finally admitted to her he had been having an affair with his assistant, he said that she, Betty, was crazy.
He kept telling me that I was sick and that I was crazy and that I needed help. And he told the children that I was sick.
How did that affect you?
It made me feel sick.
At the same time, Dan was still sending Betty flowers. But within months, she said, he sold their only joint property from beneath her, their home. When he wouldn't discuss the matter, she drove her car into his house.
I had no one to talk to. I just wanted to talk to Dan, and I bammed my car into his door.
Betty said Dan called the police, and she wound up in county mental health for 3 days. Betty Broderick always complained she couldn't get a fair hearing in this town when her husband was alive. Now that he's dead, she is getting her day in court. Lorraine Kimmel, News 8, downtown.
Hi, you've reached the Broderick. Dan and I are out and about, so leave your message at the beep. Thanks.
When Elizabeth Broderick heard her husband's girlfriend and later wife on Dan Broderick's phone answer machine, she followed the instructions and left messages, more often than not, according to the prosecutor, obscene ones.
I have very important things to ask you. You're making me mad. I'll kill you.
That was tame compared to other messages played during cross-examination. Prosecutor Carrie Wells asked Broderick if she put her 7-year-old son, Rhett, up to leaving this message for his father.
Do you pay Linda to sleep with you? Goodbye.
I didn't have Rhett do that, but I heard Rhett do that, and I've heard for years that Rhett did that.
You were right there when Rhett made that call, weren't you?
No.
You dared him to make the call.
No.
Wells kept attacking Broderick's previous testimony, like claims that Dan had given Elizabeth a black eye.
Isn't it true that you told reporters that he never touched you? He never
Well, that's not
abused
true,
you?
is it? We have 5 children. He's obviously touched me.
You've indicated that he never abused you. He never hit you.
That's not true either. I mean, it's somewhere in the middle.
When Broderick showed the prosecutor the scars from what Broderick said was a suicide attempt over Dan, the prosecutor said she couldn't see the scars. The judge suggested, and Broderick agreed to show the jury.
I used a man's razor and a right-handed, and I cut myself 3 times on these blue lines.
And when it came to Broderick's claims that she couldn't take her children because she didn't get enough money from her ex, Wells produced clothing bills.
On December 8th, 1987, did you write a $1,000 check to Nordstrom's?
If that's what it says, yes.
Is that your check, ma'am?
Yes.
On December 15th, 1987, did you write a $1,000 check to Neiman Marcus?
Yes.
The total for clothing that year, $37,000. Wells asked Elizabeth if it wasn't true that Dan was afraid of her, afraid because Elizabeth constantly threatened his life.
Why would he be afraid of me?
Testimony continues tomorrow. Lorraine Kimmel, News 8, downtown. Elizabeth Broderick looks drawn in this 3rd week of trial, even though her attorney continues putting on the stand. Friends clearly sympathetic to her life before and after her separation from Dan Broderick.
I mean, if you wanted to find the perfect mother that beamed around her children, that would be Betty Broderick.
Defense attorney Jack Early also put on the stand Broderick's maid of a dozen years, who recalled how Broderick cried constantly when she didn't have her children.
No dormía en las noches, llorando, llorando.
All the time, in the morning, in the afternoon, at night, when there were calls from the children, she would spend the night crying and crying.
Prosecutor Carrie Wells questioned the woman about the time Dan Broderick's clothes were burned.
And Mrs. Broderick told you that it was Mr. Broderick who had burned his own clothes, correct?
Y la señora Broderick le dijo a usted que era el señor Broderick que había quemado su propia ropa, ¿correcto?
Sí.
Yes.
Broderick herself testified that she burned the clothes in a fit of anger. And then there was the black eye incident. Broderick says Dan hit her.
And I noticed that she had been crying, and it looked like she'd been hit.
Did she have a black eye or a red one?
I thought she did.
But on cross-examination,
Did she ever tell you that Dan Broderick had hit her?
No, she has never told me that he has.
Broderick did smile briefly today when a friend said that she and Dan looked like they belonged on the top of a wedding cake. More testimony tomorrow. Lorraine Kimmel, News 8, downtown.